Hello, it's Justin with J&J Dynasty coming at you again. Another monthly installment of Woo Spinning the Computer. Monthly installment of Dynasty draft results. And now, again, these are one quarterback PPR standard Dynasty leagues. And I've been keeping track of them since basically the holiday weekend in May when the draft started. So this is now July 12th. So these results were basically from July 10th and before. So it's going to give you a good representation of where everything's at and where guys are. And what I did was I included all of them because they're basically in chronological order. So they're going to go from this side to this side as far as when the drafts happen. And the ones that are farthest over this way are going to be the last drafts. All right. Then after that, the first column is going to be all the points totaled up. So it's going to be like a golf score. The lowest is the best. Then the next one with the decimal point in it, that's going to be the sum and the average of them because I think that there's 12 draft results, if I remember correctly. So that's going to be what they are and where they're going. So in your draft, you can look at that decimal point number to figure out when and where you might want to really start thinking about drafting a guy if you like that guy, or where you may have to maneuver in your draft to get that. So what the nice part about that is that gives you a couple different pieces of information. You know, what the standard over the long haul, what their value is. Also, it gives you like a snapshot of the last, it's going to be like right in about here on the spreadsheet. The snapshot of the last 3, 4, 5 drafts and where they've been going. So you can actually see some guys have gone down, some guys have gone up, some guys have been all over the board. So you really can't tell depending on some weird stuff. But the biggest thing is with the draft number, with the decimal point, you can see who's going off the board when. So that really helps. I think I've done several drafts with some of the knowledge of this. And it really helps to try to jump back up or jump back in a draft typically to get the players that I want. So let's get into it. And then finally to the way that way. Oh, God. Way that way. All right. It's going to be 2 columns. And after the decimal point, and those are the columns for Fantasy Pros. The very first one is going to be July the 2nd. Well, the second one. The one furthest this way is going to be the furthest to the outside is going to be the June fantasy draft, fantasy trade value chart, and the one that's just on the inside of it is going to be July. So the one closest to the decimal point is going to be the one for July. So you can see that also how much guys' values have changed if they're going up, if they're going down. So I figured that might be a little bit of useful information also. Well, let's start it off here again with the slideshow. So yay, the thumbnail, great, we love it. We're moving on. All right, so here's going to be the first round, basically, right? So Breece Hall is going everywhere. So now what I'm talking about is I've got it highlighted in there. That is the number of the average. So that's the sum is going to be row Q. So that's going to be all of them, from here going back all the way to D here. All those are added up, or they should be. So then when I take those by the 12, that's going to give you your average draft position. And now T and U, letter T is going to be Fantasy Pros trade value chart for this month, which is July, and U is going to be for June. So the farthest out one, like for Breece Hall, he was at 63, now he's down to 62 in the last month. So you can keep track of that and maybe see that their draft values are not going up or going down. And like I said, if you look backwards from ONMLK, take the last 4 or 5 drafts, you can see if guys are being drafted higher or lower than what their average is and are. So you may have to adjust what you want to do there. But it's been pretty standard and had some crazy drafts, but it still winds up coming out. I think it's almost in the exact order. Williamson was 7, then Olave and Cook. But Breece Hall, number 1, Walker, number 2, London, 3, Burks, 4, Garrett Wilson, 5, Olave, 6, Cooks, 7, and Jameis Williamson, who is falling. So he's gone down on average from the very first couple drafts. I mean, he was locked in at number 6 for a long time, but Olave and Cook have like jumped ahead of him, right? So that's what we have with that. Sky Moore's locked in pretty solidly at number 9, and you can see his value is there right at 9. Now he's getting a little competition. Christian Watson is pushing him a little bit, and then George Pickens, and we have Dameon Pierce, right? So those guys are the guys that are going to finish out the first round. And if you look at it, especially 9, 10, 11, 12, in column R, the numbers are running right along with what you're seeing there. So with that being said, you got to look at 7 through 5. All those guys are basically at 6. I mean, it's a very slight change between all those guys as far as between them. All right, so let's go out. All right, so let's get on to round 2. I'm going to try to make this video a little bit short. Hopefully you can read it and see everything. Hopefully I've got it down far enough from the top where if you do pause it on YouTube, you can actually see the numbers and go from there, right? There we go, and that one should be a little bit better. So this will be your second round, 2-1 through 2-12. And Dotson, Spiller, White, Bell, Zamir White, Algier, and if you notice, Algier has been creeping up quite a bit in the last 3 last 3 drafts. He's been going 16, 14, and 16. And it's actually a little bit more than that, 15, 22, 16, 14, 16. So I've seen him as high as 2-3 in some of the drafts. And so that's a big movement, and not even in drafts that I'm watching, but it's a big movement for him. Spiller came in that the last draft was crazy. He was way up in the first round. So I mean that's going to help his average draft position. But I mean look again with the decimal points where they're locked in. Look at how the values for Fantasy Pros, the trade charts are kind of out there. What does it say here? Oh, that's 13, 14. Sorry. I think it's kind of crazy when you have, Rashad White at 20, Dotson at 36, and Spiller's at 15, but everybody prefers basically Spiller in the last several drafts to those guys. 2 of the 3 last drafts, Spiller's gone ahead of Dotson. So, I mean, I think that's kind of crazy. Another fun thing is like Trey McBride. He's all the way down there, and he's holding strong at 23 points on the Fantasy Pros trade value chart, even though he's not going to produce for you for a couple of years because he's going to be behind Zach Ertz. So I think that's pretty funny. But if you look at the column there, it starts off at 13.08, and it ends up at 23.83 for picks 13 through 24. So that's almost dead on. And the thing that's really interesting is that in the second round, this is where you start getting your priority free agents, I would say, the guys who made mistakes and dropped guys too early or just dropped guys because they don't know what the heck they're doing. So even with that being said, the second round is still right on par as far as the top 24 rookies for the top 3 positions. So, I mean, I think that's kind of actually fascinating. Maybe there should be some deviation, maybe not. I mean, 12 for our purposes as far as drafts is a pretty big sample size, but statistically it's probably not that big of a draft sample size. So that kind of gives you all that information. So I've talked here a little bit so people can take a look at what I put out there, and so that way people don't have to stop and pause it if they don't want to or don't need to. So hopefully you can take a look and see your guys. So let's just run through it, I guess. Dotson, Spiller, White, Bell, White number 2, or the bad White, I guess you could say, because he's not as good as the good White. Who knows? So Algier, Alec Pierce, so he'd be Pierce number 2, I guess, or second round Pierce, maybe we call him. Mechie, Brian Robinson, Tolbert, Davis Price, and McBride. So that rounds out your second round on average, or top 24 rookies. All right. So let's go here, and I will start saying, so I've put down at the very bottom row is kind of the leagues that they were in, so I could keep track for myself, so I'm not duplicating. But if anybody's in any of those leagues, you can verify those if you want to. But as you can see to the far right, that way in the screen, I got 722 Fan Pro, so that's what the 722, the Dynasty trade chart value. That's what that's supposed to be, and also the one further that way is the June Fan Pro trade value chart. So that's what those are again, and I wanted to say that again. Once again at the bottom here, if you see a guy who has a 60, then he was either not drafted or he was drafted after the pick. I know that was it Kyron White, I think, was drafted one time and he had a 60. He was actually drafted as the 65th pick. I just put 60 in there because those 5 picks don't matter that much. Pick 60 is so far beyond the 37 that it really doesn't matter that I kept track of. Now, with this being said, a couple things that you'll notice that there's a couple guys that are missing. There's a couple running backs, maybe Snoop Connor, right? And then you also have like Dulcich and there's another tight end that's been getting drafted. So the New York guy. But basically the size of the matter is that they've gotten drafted in some drafts lately, and they haven't been consistently drafted, so they're not on the list. So really, if you pick them at any time after pick 30, you're good to go on them. After the first 2.5 rounds, it really doesn't matter. So we take a look at this, and this is round 3, right? Should be starting at 25. So by the time you get to pick 30, you've got Strong or Shakir. And you look at their average draft position as instead of 30, it's 36. 36 is a 4th rounder, right? So that's where they're going, at least in the 4th round. So some people are getting them a little bit middle of 3rd round. Some people are getting them in the middle of the 4th round. So, that's really what it says. So anything that would be in the 40s, if you're taking somebody after round 3, 5, 3, 6, it's a crapshoot anyways in this draft. So, whether you're going to pick Connor or anybody who's not on the list, they're good to go after 3.5 or 3.6 or 3.8 or pick 40. I should say pick 30. Yeah, basically. So, that's kind of the results of this draft. Draft mock-up. So this is all the information. Like, click, subscribe, hit that bell so when another one of these is coming out, you guys can see it. Hopefully this gives you guys a little bit of information. Hopefully this helps you with a couple of your drafts here upcoming. In worst case scenario, this may even in other leagues, if you have a startup league, if you have a best ball league, if you have maybe not so much best ball, but if you're doing a redraft league, this is probably going to be roughly the same rate or order that the guys are going to be picked in a regular redraft fantasy league. So maybe you can use it for that. Other than that, I think it's pretty good data. The last couple drafts I've done, it's almost run right down, and I feel very happy with moving back and forth and back to get the guys who I want. There's not a lot of guys in this draft. There's like 5, 6, 7 guys who I'm comfortable taking, and I've been getting too many shares of them. So I'm getting pretty sick of drafting, actually. And there's so many guys I have a hot take on that I do not like them. I got Michael Carter last year, and I'm going to call it that. Is Algier going to be a Michael Carter? Is Spiller going to be a Michael Carter? Is Pierce going to be a Michael Carter? Is every one of these running backs other than Walker, maybe because of the draft capital? Cook and Hall, are those guys all going to be Michael Carter? Where you draft Hall with him the next year because you only got a 3rd or 4th round draft capital on that running back, and he's just going to be the primary backup. So, that's what I'm calling getting Cartered, right? So that's what my big question marks are. So that's pretty much the size of the draft. Like, click, subscribe, comments below, let me know, and you're good to go.